Everyone believed I had no heart. They were right until she walked back into my life carrying coffee, a trembling smile, and the scent of the same lilac perfume that had haunted my dreams for 6 years. I had taught thousands of students in my career, but only one ever made me forget the rules. The first time I saw Lily Moore again was on a rainy Monday morning in Boston, outside the philosophy department of Greenfield University. I was on my way to lecture about moral boundaries, ironic, given how many I'd crossed years ago. My reputation was solid. Dr. Eleanor Hayes. Cold, brilliant, unshakably composed. I was the professor students feared, the one who never curved grades, never accepted late papers, never smiled unless sarcasm demanded it. And then I saw her, standing under the overhang, soaked from the rain, clutching a coffee cup with both hands. Her hair was shorter now, curled at the ends, her expression older, but those eyes. The same deep hazel that used to pull the logic right out of me. Dr. Hayes. Her voice cracked softly on my name. Time didn't rewind. It stopped. Lily, I managed, my throat tighter than my posture could hide. I shouldn't have said her name like that, too familiar, too soft, too everything I'd spent years burying. She smiled, a nervous flicker. I didn't think you'd remember me. Remember her? I'd rewritten my entire life trying not to. 6 years ago, she'd been my brightest student, brilliant, stubborn, hungry for meaning. We had late-night debates about ethics and freedom, sitting in my office long after campus went dark. She'd look at me like I was the only truth she wanted to understand. And one night I almost ruined us both. She'd confessed her feelings. I told her she was confused. She'd cried. I'd stayed silent. Then she disappeared, graduated early, moved across the country, vanished from my world like an undone equation. And now she was standing there shivering, saying, I'm teaching here now. Just joined the English department. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. Congratulations, I said, forcing professionalism into my tone. You always had a way with words. And you always had a way with walls, she replied, smiling sadly. Her voice hit me like a mirror, sharp and truthful. I wanted to tell her I'd missed her, that I'd thought about her every time I passed that empty chair in my office. But professors don't say such things, especially not to former students. The days that followed felt like living in a novel I didn't agree to write. Our offices were 2 floors apart. I saw her in the cafeteria, in the faculty lounge, in meetings where she laughed too loudly and avoided my eyes. The world moved, but every time she walked into a room, I forgot my own sentences. One evening, after a long department meeting, I found her standing alone in the library, running her fingers along the spines of old poetry books. Still reading Neruda? I asked. She turned, startled. Still pretending not to feel anything? It wasn't a question. It was a wound. We talked. About her classes, her students, her cat. About everything except the one thing pulsing between us. Then, as the library lights dimmed, she whispered, Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Letting me go. The words sat between us, heavy and trembling. My throat burned, but I said nothing. Silence with Saffret had always been my weapon and my curse. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. That's what I thought. And she walked away. I stood there, surrounded by books about love, morality, and all the lies I'd told myself. The next morning, the rumor started. Dr. Hayes has been seen spending time with the new English lecturer. Faculty gossip spreads faster than truth. I ignored it, as I always did. But something inside me shifted. Maybe I was tired of being the woman who never broke. That night, I found myself standing outside her apartment. Don't ask how I knew where she lived. Boston isn't that big, and my self-control isn't infinite. I knocked. She opened the door wearing a gray sweater in surprise. Dr. Hayes, she said, blinking. Or should I call you Eleanor now? I almost turned around. But then she smiled soft, forgiving, and I realized how much I'd missed hearing my name in her mouth. Inside, her apartment was warm, cluttered with books and plants. A half-finished poem sat on the table. I wanted to ask if it was about me, but the thought alone felt arrogant. So I stood there, an intruder in my own emotions. She poured me tea. I didn't deserve it. I'm sorry for that night, I said finally. Which one? She asked, voice low. The one where you told me how you felt, and I pretended not to hear you. She looked at me for a long time, as if deciding whether forgiveness was a language she still spoke. "I thought you didn't believe in regret," she said. "I didn't. Until you." The air between us thickened, part confession, part memory. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to bridge 6 years of silence. But I was still the professor, still the rule follower, still afraid. She took a step closer. "You taught me about ethics," she whispered. "But love isn't ethical, is it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I felt the truth pressing between us, raw, dangerous, inevitable. "I never stopped loving you," she said softly. And just like that, the world, the lectures, the reputation, the years collapsed. But life has a way of demanding consequences. The next day, the dean called me into his office. Apparently, a student had taken a photo of us together at a cafe near campus. We weren't doing anything, just sitting close, smiling, but the internet doesn't care about context. "Eleanor," he said, tone heavy with disappointment, "you know how this looks." Yes, I did. I wanted to scream that love isn't misconduct, that my heart didn't read policy manuals. But all I said was, "Understood." He warned me to maintain professional boundaries. The phrase tasted like ashes. That evening I found Lily waiting for me in the courtyard, holding 2 coffees again, just like the day we'd met. "I heard," she said. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It feels like it is." "It's not." We stood in silence, the air sharp with autumn chill. Then she whispered, "If you want me to stay away, I will." I looked at her, really looked. The way her eyes searched mine for permission to hurt less. The way her lips trembled as if afraid of the answer. And I realized I was done living by fear disguised as discipline. "Don't," I said. "Don't stay away." She smiled, tiny, tearful, radiant. And for the first time in years I smiled back. But love, once resurrected, doesn't come quietly. It demands to be seen, to be tested, to prove it still breathes. That week we started meeting after hours. First to talk about books, ideas, life. Then to sit in silence that said more than words ever could. I told myself it was friendship. It wasn't. It was gravity. And gravity doesn't ask for permission. We were reckless in quiet ways. No stolen kisses in hallways, no lingering touches where eyes could see. Just the occasional brush of fingers as we passed a book, the rare smile that lasted 1 second too long. But to anyone paying attention, it was enough to suspect. And someone was paying attention. One night after a guest lecture, I found an anonymous note slipped under my office door. "Does the great Dr. Hayes believe in ethics when it comes to her own love life?" No name. No signature. Just that cruel sentence, typed and printed, folded twice. I stared at it until the letters blurred. My first instinct was denial. My second was fear. When I looked up, Lily was standing at the doorway. "What's that?" she asked. "Nothing important," I said, sliding the paper into a drawer. But she knew. She always knew when I was lying. We walked home in silence that night. The city was glowing with winter lights, and I could feel her hand brushing mine. Desperate for comfort but not daring to take it. At the corner she stopped. "You're scared," she said. "Of what?" "Of being seen. Of being loved. Of both." Her voice trembled but her eyes didn't. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but she wasn't. The truth is, I'd built my entire life around not needing anyone. And now, needing her felt like standing barefoot on glass. Weeks passed and the whispers grew. A student mentioned seeing us leaving campus together. A colleague from the history department made a joke at the faculty lounge, followed by nervous laughter. "Eleanor, you're glowing lately," he said, smirking. "New inspiration?" I smiled politely. Enlightenment. It happens when one stops listening to idiots. The room laughed, but the silence after was heavier than any applause. That night, Lily came over with takeout. We ate on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by stacks of papers and open books. "You're too calm," she said. "Would panic help?" "Sometimes it helps to feel something." "I feel plenty," I said. "Mostly regret." She set down her chopsticks. "Regret what exactly? Me? Or that someone might find out about me?" The question sliced through the air. "I regret not being brave sooner," I said. She looked at me for a long moment, then leaned closer. "Then stop hiding." The word stayed in my mind for days. Stop hiding. I tried. I tried so hard. But old habits are stubborn things. Even love can't rewrite the way a lifetime of caution has trained your hands not to reach. Then one Friday morning, the university newspaper published a blind item. Rumors swirl about an inappropriate relationship between two faculty members, one notably known for her rigid ethics lectures. No names. But everyone knew. By noon, students were whispering in hallways. By evening, the dean's office had scheduled a discussion. I met Lily at the park that night. She looked pale, her hands shaking as she held a coffee cup. "This is my fault," she said. "Don't," I replied. "I should have been more careful." "It's not about careful," I said. "It's about cruel people who think love is scandal." She looked at me, tears threatening. "We could deny it." I shook my head. "I won't lie about you." Her eyes widened. "Then what will you do?" I didn't answer. 'Cause I didn't know. All I knew was that losing her again would be worse than losing everything else. The next day, the dean called us both in. His office smelled like old leather and politics. "Dr. Hayes," he began, "you've built a strong reputation here. But this situation complicates things." "I understand," I said. "Do you deny the relationship?" I looked at Lily beside me. Her hands were clasped, her eyes fixed on the floor. "No," I said quietly. "I don't." The silence that followed felt like falling from a great height. He sighed. "Then, as per university policy, we'll begin a review. Until it's resolved, you're suspended from teaching duties." When I walked out of that office, the January air hit me like punishment. Lily followed, tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have let this happen." "Stop," I said. "You didn't make me love you." She shook her head. "You're losing everything." "Not everything," I whispered. "Not if I still have you." She reached for my hand, and for the first time I didn't pull away. The days after the suspension were quiet. I stayed home, watched snow pile on the balcony, read books I couldn't focus on. The university called for statements. The media sniffed for a story. Lily came by often, sometimes just to sit in silence with me. One evening she found me staring out the window, untouched tea growing cold on the table. "Eleanor," she said softly, "you don't have to keep proving you're strong." "I'm not strong," I said. "Yes, you are. You're the bravest person I know." I laughed bitterly. "I'm suspended, possibly finished, and in love with a woman I once graded on her essays." She smiled faintly. "And yet, somehow, you still make it sound poetic." It was strange how love could make ruin feel sacred. We started spending weekends together, cooking, reading, talking about nothing and everything. She made my apartment feel alive again. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and see her asleep on the couch, hair spread across the pillow, peace written across her face. I'd think, if this is the cost of my career, maybe it's worth it. But peace never lasts long for women like me. One afternoon, a message arrived from the university board. The final decision would be announced the next day. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I packed a small bag and walked to the faculty building one last time. The halls were empty. My office looked smaller than I remembered. I ran a hand over the desk, the books, the notes, 16 years of my life condensed into silence. Then I found her old essay tucked behind a file. "Love is not about possession or logic. It's about the courage to be seen." She had written that at 22. I had given it an A. Now it felt like she graded me instead and I'd failed. That night, Lily found me at my desk. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I needed to say goodbye," I replied. "To what?" "To the version of me that pretended not to care." She frowned. "You think this is the end?" "I think it's the beginning of something I can't control." "Maybe that's the point," she said softly. "You've controlled everything your whole life. Maybe it's time you let love be messy." The next morning, we stood outside the boardroom together. My heart pounded. She squeezed my hand. "No matter what they say," she whispered, "don't let them make you small." The door opened. The verdict was merciless. Termination of position, effective immediately. They used words like inappropriate, compromised, reputation. Not once did they use the word love. When it was over, I thanked them politely because that's what a composed woman does when her life burns down politely. Outside, Lily cried. I didn't. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe start over. Somewhere no one knows my name." Then let me come with you. I turned to her, startled. Lily, I'm serious. You think I can keep teaching there after what they did to you? You have a career, I said. So did you, she shot back. And you still chose me. The words struck like sunlight after months of rain. A week later, we left Boston. We drove north until the city lights disappeared and the air smelled like pine and freedom. We found a small town by the coast, quiet, unassuming. I rented a little house overlooking the ocean. She found a job at a local bookstore. The world thought I'd vanished. Maybe I had. But every morning I'd wake to the sound of waves and her laughter echoing from the kitchen, and I'd think, maybe this is what finding yourself looks like, not glory, not redemption, just peace. One evening as we watched the sunset, she leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you ever miss teaching? She asked. Sometimes, I said. But I don't miss pretending. She smiled. You were never meant to hide, you know. Neither were you, I said. She laughed softly. Then maybe we're both finally doing something right. That night, she handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a notebook. On the first page she'd written, "For the woman who taught me to question everything, even fear." I felt my throat tighten. I thought you could write again, she said shyly. Maybe tell our story. Our story? Yes. The one everyone misunderstood. I closed the notebook gently. You think anyone would believe it? She smiled. They don't have to. It's ours. We didn't call what we had perfect. We didn't need to. It was real, messy, beautiful, hard-earned. Some nights we argued. Some mornings we laughed until tears came. But every moment felt like breathing for the first time. Love, I'd learned, isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing the person who makes the fear worth it. Months later, I received a letter from one of my former students. It said, Dr. Hayes, I heard what happened. People talk, but I want you to know your lectures changed how I see truth. You taught me that integrity isn't about following rules. It's about standing for something that matters. I folded the letter and smiled. Maybe, in some strange way, I was still teaching, just differently. As spring arrived, the town bloomed around us. The bookstore held poetry readings, and Lily made me read one of my essays aloud. When I finished, the small crowd clapped. I looked at her, her eyes shining, proud, and I realized something simple and stunning. I was happy. Truly, quietly, irrevocably happy. That night, as we stood by the water, she whispered, Do you ever think about how it all started? All the time, I said. A rainy morning, a cup of coffee, and a smile that ruined everything I thought I knew. She laughed, leaning closer. You call that ruined? I shook my head. No. I call it saved. Spring turned into summer, and our days found rhythm. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through the curtains and the soft hum of coffee brewing. Lily would sit by the window, legs tucked under her, scribbling poems in her notebook. I'd pretend to read but mostly watched her, memorizing the small details, the way her hair caught the light, how she hummed under her breath when she thought no one was listening. I used to think love was a grand declaration, something that shattered silence. Now I knew it was the quiet in-between moments. A shared mug, a knowing glance, a hand reaching for yours without needing to ask. One afternoon we took a drive along the coast. The wind tangled her hair and she laughed. God, that laugh. It was the sound of something finally free. I never thought we'd end up here, she said, eyes on the ocean. Neither did I admitted. If someone told me 5 years ago that I'd trade academia for a tiny seaside town, I would have cited them for emotional delusion. She grinned. And now I think maybe I was the delusional one before. She squeezed my hand. I like this version of you. The one that smiles. I looked at her. That version only exists because of you. By July, we had built something resembling a life. I started writing again, essays, small pieces about truth and vulnerability, the kind of thoughts I used to bury beneath academic precision. Lily kept pushing me to submit them to magazines. I kept resisting. People already judged me once, I told her. They didn't judge you, she said gently. They judged the story they made up about you. There was wisdom in her voice that reminded me how much she'd grown, how she was no longer the student who used to blush when I challenged her ideas. She was her own woman now, strong, brave, tender, and she'd somehow chosen to love me anyway. One evening I caught her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the horizon. What are you thinking? I asked. She smiled faintly. I got an email today. Greenfield is hosting a symposium. They invited me to speak. My chest tightened. That's wonderful. There's more, she said softly. They asked about you. Someone on the committee wants to hear your perspective on academic ethics. I laughed bitterly. The irony is poetic. I know, but maybe it's a chance. A chance for what? Redemption. Closure. Maybe just to be heard again. I stayed quiet for a long moment. The thought of returning to that campus, the place that once felt like my entire identity, made something inside me flinch. But when I looked at her, I saw not fear but hope reflected in her eyes. And I realized sometimes you don't go back to prove people wrong. You go back to show yourself you survived. A few weeks later, we stood at the university gates again. Everything looked the same, the ivy, the stone buildings, the hum of young voices, but I wasn't the same woman who used to walk these halls. My nameplate was gone from the door. My office belonged to someone else. But my story somehow was still written in the air. The symposium hall was full. I was just an audience member, but when Lily went up to speak, I swear the whole room tilted toward her. She spoke about language, empathy, and the courage it takes to tell the truth even when it costs you comfort. And when she said, I learned that from a teacher who refused to let fear define her. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't look away from me. The applause that followed felt like forgiveness. Afterward, some of my old colleagues approached, hesitant, uncertain. One said, You look happy, Eleanor. I am, I replied simply. No explanations. No justifications. Just truth finally light enough to carry. That night we walked through the old courtyard. The air smelled like rain. I stopped under the same lamppost where I'd first seen her again months ago. Funny, I said quietly. It all started right here. And it's still starting, she replied. Every day. I smiled. You always were better with words. She laughed. You were just too proud to admit it. We went back to our little house by the sea, the symposium behind us like a chapter finally closed. I started publishing essays again under my name this time. To my surprise, readers responded. They didn't care about the scandal, only the honesty. One of them wrote, Your story made me braver to love who I love. I showed Lily and she cried. You see, she said. You're still teaching. Just differently. Months melted into seasons. We adopted a dog. Lily's poetry collection got published. I found myself lecturing occasionally at community center talks about authenticity and moral courage. No classrooms, no tenure, no applause. Just people who listened and maybe for the first time really heard. Every morning began with her beside me. Every night ended with her heartbeat against my palm. And in between, we built an ordinary miracle out of two extraordinary mistakes that somehow found their way to grace. One autumn afternoon, I came home to find her sitting on the porch again, eyes red from crying. What happened? I asked, rushing to her side. She handed me a letter. It's from my parents. I froze. They'd never approved of her loving women, least of all me. The last time she'd called them, her mother had hung up. I opened the letter slowly. It wasn't long. We were wrong. Come visit us when you're ready. Bring her. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then she started laughing through her tears, and I followed, both of us shaking with relief. The visit was awkward at first. Her parents were cautious, polite, visibly nervous. But time has a way of softening even the hardest truths. By the end of dinner, her father had asked about my writing. Her mother hugged me when we left. It wasn't full acceptance yet, but it was a beginning. On the drive home, she rested her head on my shoulder. I think they're trying, she whispered. So are we, I said. That winter we decided to get married not because we needed the ceremony, but because we wanted to choose each other in front of the world that once doubted us. It was small. Just a few friends, the ocean, the sound of waves instead of an orchestra. I wore a simple navy dress. She wore white. When the officiant asked, Do you take her? She looked at me and said, I already did a long time ago. And I rigid, stoic, unflappable Eleanor Hayes cried in front of everyone. Later, at the small reception, someone asked if I missed my old life. I thought about the classrooms, the lectures, the applause. Then I looked at her, laughing with her friends, sunlight caught in her hair. No, I said. I don't miss anything that kept me from this. Years passed gently after that. We stayed by the sea. Our lives became a patchwork of moments, morning walks, late-night debates, the occasional storm we weathered together. Love aged with us, not fading but deepening, like the grooves of a well-read book. Sometimes former students found my essays online and wrote to me. Sometimes we went back to Boston just to walk through the old campus in disguise, laughing at how small it seemed now. And sometimes on quiet nights she'd read me her new poems, and I'd fall asleep before the last line, only to wake to her whispering, "You always did like happy endings." One evening I asked her, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "If they had, maybe we wouldn't have fought this hard for each other." I smiled. "You make everything sound like literature." "That's because love is literature," she said. Messy, poetic, and impossible to summarize. Years later, when I was gray-haired and she still teased me for forgetting to water the plants, I finally finished a book. It wasn't a memoir, not exactly. It was a story about two women who found love in the wrong time, the wrong place, and somehow made it right anyway. I titled it, Only She Knows. Lily wrote the foreword. Her final sentence read, "The world saw a professor. I saw the woman brave enough to love me." When the book was published, it reached people I'd never meet. Some called it controversial. Others called it beautiful. I didn't care which. All I knew was that our story had found its way into light. One morning years later, we sat on the same porch watching the tide roll in. The dog snored at our feet. The air smelled like salt and tea. She turned to me, smiling faintly. "Do you ever miss teaching?" I shook my head. "I still teach, remember? Just through words now." She laughed. "And what's today's lesson, Professor Hayes?" "That life has no syllabus," I said. "You just love who you love, and hope the world learns something from it." She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You're still terrible at endings." I smiled. "That's because love doesn't end." The sun dipped low, casting gold across the waves. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of her breathing beside meth, only truth that ever mattered. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a contradiction. I felt whole. I felt seen. I felt home. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.